Right now, you are doing something your ancestors never could. You are sitting still, not hunting, not building, not running from something with teeth, just sitting, staring at a screen, choosing to consume a single piece of information for the next 10 minutes when 1,000 other things compete for your attention. That ability, and to sit with boredom and choose what to do next, might be the most dangerous cognitive superpower your species ever developed. And almost no one talks about what it cost you to get it. The real answer to what boredom is, where it came from, and what it is quietly doing to your brain right now is far stranger than you think. Start with this. For almost the entire span of human existence, boredom as you know it did not exist. Your ancestors 200,000 years ago did not stare at the ceiling wondering what to do with their afternoon. Every waking moment was structured by survival. Find food, avoid predators, maintain social bonds that kept the group alive. The nervous system had no bandwidth left over for something as abstract as being bored. Psychologist John Eastwood at York University spent years trying to define boredom scientifically. What he found was that boredom is not simply having nothing to do. It is something far more specific. It is the failure to engage attention with something the mind wants to engage with. You want to be absorbed. Your brain is looking for a signal to lock onto, and it cannot find one. That gap between wanting to be engaged and failing to be engaged is boredom, and that gap is a distinctly modern problem. Here is why. The human brain evolved for a world that was constantly, exhaustingly stimulating. Every sound in the dark was a potential threat. Every movement on the horizon demanded evaluation. Your attentional system was never designed to idle. It was designed to fire. But somewhere in the last 12,000 years, something shifted. Agriculture happened. Walls happened. Cities happened. For the first time in the history of your species, a meaningful percentage of humans had moments where nothing urgently demanded their attention, and your brain had no idea what to do with that. Historian Patricia Meyer Spax, who wrote one of the only serious academic histories of boredom, traced the first uses of the word itself to the 18th century. Before that, older concepts like the Latin acedia described a listless spiritual emptiness felt by monks in the desert who found they could not pray, could not work, could not feel anything at all. The medieval church considered acedia a deadly sin, not because idleness was morally wrong in some abstract sense, but because the monks who experienced it were genuinely dangerous when they did. They left their communities, they abandoned their vows, they made impulsive, destructive decisions to escape the crushing weight of feeling nothing. Your brain has not changed since then. When your attentional system fails to find a signal, it does not simply go quiet, it escalates. It starts generating its own stimulation. This is what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a system of brain regions that activate specifically when you are not focused on an external task. Researchers at Washington University, including Marcus Rachel, who first mapped this network, discovered that the default mode is not rest. It is an internal simulation engine. Your brain turns inward. It runs through past events, projects into future scenarios, constructs social narratives, rehearses conflicts, imagines alternatives to your current life. You do not experience this as computation. You experience it as restlessness, as an itch you cannot scratch, as a feeling that something is wrong and you need to go somewhere else, do something else, be someone else right now, and this is where boredom becomes dangerous. University of Virginia psychologist Timothy Wilson ran a study that became one of the most quietly devastating experiments in modern psychology. He put participants alone in a room with nothing to do for 15 minutes. Just sit, no phone, no book, no stimulation, one option only, a button that would deliver a mild electric shock. Before the experiment, every participant said they would pay money to avoid being shocked. 2/3 of the men and 1/4 of the women chose to shock themselves rather than sit quietly with their own thoughts for 15 minutes. Let that settle. Your brain would rather inflict pain on itself than experience boredom. That is not a metaphor. That is a measured laboratory result. The discomfort of having nothing to engage with is, for most humans, more intolerable than physical pain. And now consider what this means in a world that has learned to weaponize that fact. Every notification on your phone is an answer to your default mode network's distress signal. Every scroll, every autoplay, every algorithmically optimized feed exists because someone understood at a deep engineering level that your brain cannot tolerate the gap between wanting engagement and having it. They did not create your need for stimulation. They found it, measured it, and built an industry around it. But the story goes deeper than that. Boredom is not only destructive, it may also be the engine that built civilization. When the default mode network runs its simulations, it is not just generating generating distress. It is generating creativity. It is connecting ideas that have never been connected before. It is asking what-if questions that the survival-focused brain never had bandwidth to ask. The philosopher Hannah Arendt argued that the capacity for idleness, the capacity to step back from the grind of biological necessity, was a prerequisite for any meaningful human thought. You cannot philosophize while fleeing a predator. Boredom gave your ancestors time to wonder, and wondering is how they invented everything you live inside. The cave paintings at Lascaux, 36,000 years old, were made by humans who had a few hours in the dark and nothing urgent to do with them. The wheel, the written word, mathematics, music, architecture, every one of these emerged not in the middle of a survival crisis, but in the small, strange, uncomfortable gap between necessity and emptiness. Your boredom is the same gap. The question is what you do with it, because here's what the research suggests. The quality of the thoughts that emerge during boredom depends almost entirely on what you do in the moments before and after. Psychologist Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire found that people who were deliberately bored before a creative task, made to read a phone book for instance, produced significantly more creative responses than people who were not bored first. The default mode network, forced to run without external input, warmed up. It made new connections. It built something in the dark. But this only happens if you let it run. Every time you reach for your phone to escape the discomfort of boredom, you short-circuit the process. You give the default mode network an easy answer before it has to generate a hard one. You trade a potentially transformative 30 seconds of discomfort for a hit of stimulation that resolves nothing and leads nowhere. Your ancestors had no choice but to sit with the empty feeling. They stared into fires. They watched clouds. They let the silence do what silence does when you do not interrupt it. And out of that silence came everything. Here is what no one tells you about the most connected era in human history. You have more access to stimulation than any human who ever lived. You carry in your pocket more information than existed in all the libraries of the ancient world. And yet rates of reported boredom are higher now than at any point researchers have ever measured. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to commit attention to any single one. The more stimulation floods your system, the higher your threshold for feeling engaged. Your brain calibrates. It raises the floor. What was thrilling last year is merely adequate this year. What was adequate this year will be insufficient next year. You are not broken. You are adapting to the environment your species built for itself. But adaptation has a cost. And the cost is that the gap, the dangerous gap, the gap your ancestors filled with invention and philosophy and the first paintings ever made, that gap keeps shrinking. Not because you have more to do, because you have trained yourself to fill it before it can breathe. Tonight, your phone will light up, maybe from across the room, maybe in your pocket, and somewhere between the moment of boredom and the moment you reach for it, there will be a fraction of a second where your default mode network is already running, already making something, already about to surprise you. And tonight, maybe for the first time, you will notice that moment, not because boredom is good or bad, but because you finally understand what it is. A signal from 200,000 years of human evolution telling you that your brain is still hungry, still searching, still trying to build something out of nothing, the same way it always has. Right now, you are doing something your ancestors never could. You are sitting still, and now you know exactly how much it cost them to give you that.